Welcome to today's inquiry. The topic is, what is reality? And we'll get to that. I see some smiles with that statement. So we'll get to that subject and investigate it. But first, let's come together and be quiet for a few minutes. So just relax. Relax your mind and your body. Let go of any concerns about the inquiry or anything else about your life. Just relax. Take a few deep breaths. If that helps you relax. And with normal breathing, be aware of the sounds, the sound of my voice, any other sounds that you're aware of. There's a rooster crowing in the distance. So be aware of all the sounds. And during this meditation and the inquiry, there will be sensations arising in your body. So be aware of those sensations. So be aware of sounds, be aware of physical sensations, and be aware of thoughts. And there's no goal to this meditation or the inquiry. So there's nothing that needs to be done with a thought, a sound, or a sensation. Simply let them come and let them go. So you're relaxed now and open and accepting of the sounds, of the physical sensations, and of the thoughts. No resistance and no attachment. Now move your attention a little bit. Move the attention from the sounds, from the thoughts, from the sensations. Move the attention from them to the one that's aware of them. There is a knowing and awareness when a sound, sensation, or thought arises. So you're now aware of noticing, of observing a thought, a sound, a sensation appear and disappear. And with this self-awareness, everything slows down and there's no attachment to what's happening. And with the slowing down of thinking, of thoughts, there is clarity. A sound is heard clearly. A sensation in the body is felt clearly. A thought is seen clearly. It's clear seeing, clarity. And from this clarity of self-awareness, see now if there's a space between thoughts, a space between sounds, a space between physical sensations. Look now, see if there's a space. If there is, without any effort, without doing anything, relax in the space. Fall into it. Don't be afraid. Become the space between sounds, between thoughts, between sensations. Now as space, open up, expand space to spaciousness, vastness, immensity, spaciousness, no beginning, no end, like the sky, no boundaries, no limitations, spaciousness. Now relax and rest in spaciousness. And from this openness and peacefulness, let us inquire together, what is reality? For the purpose of our inquiry, there are many, many descriptions of reality. But a definition of real is what is directly experienced, not a projection, not a fantasy, but what is real in this moment, a sensation, a thought, a sound. That's the direct evidence in this moment, and you can add the rest of the senses. So reality is this, the experience. Now, when we break down that experience, we begin with perception. There is a perception of something. This is exploring reality from a material perspective of the relativeness. There is a perception, then there is perceiving and what's perceived. All of that takes place without knowing. It's so quick. And from the perception, the perceiver, and what's perceived, that moves into conception, what it is that's been perceived. And that's when we identify it, the concept. It's a sound, it's a sensation, it's a thought, it's a taste, it's a smell. That's the conception, the word, the identification of what is perceived. So from perception to conception. And then from conception can come the I that likes what's been perceived or doesn't like what's been perceived and conceived. Then starts the whole I and me and the package of oneself. We won't get into that in detail because that's been covered in another inquiry, who am I? But that's kind of the process of perception, conception, and then the I. And the beginning of this whole story of me, I, and what is real. And if there is an agreement on what is perceived and conceived, it becomes consensual reality. We agree on the concept, and there is support for that. And the reality that most people have is consensual. We agree, and it's cultural. The reality of somebody living in the West may not be the reality of somebody living in the East. And either way, this reality is based on the perception of something, the conception of what's perceived. So there is a subject and an object. This is what's called subjective reality. Subject and object. What is perceived and then conceived. So there's two. Now, is that real and is that truthful? Well, maybe you heard of the story of the 6 blind men and the elephants. 6 blind men were told about this strange animal in town called an elephant. So they went to the elephant. And the first blind man touched the trunk. And he said, it's a thick snake. Another blind man touched the tail and said, it's a rope. Another blind man, the third, touched the tusk and said, it's a spear. The fourth blind man touched the side and said, it's a wall. The fifth blind man touched the ear and said, it's a fan. And the sixth blind man touched the leg and said it's a tree trunk. So this was their perception and their conception of what they experienced. But it wasn't an elephant. So what can we say of that? It was half real, half true. But from this identification with what has been learned to call it a spear, this is learned. It feels like this and it's a spear. Now we can take this reality of each individual blind man and say if they believe it so strongly that this is what it is, then they can become righteous and say this is my reality and your reality, what you touched and perceived and conceived, is not correct. And from this righteousness is born violence. The attachment to this is real. This is my reality, and I need you to support it. And if you're not able to support it, then maybe you need to be beaten into my way to realize my way is the right way. So all of this comes from this perception, an idea of what's been perceived. So the big picture is not there for these blind men. Can we say they're wrong? No. But can we see in ourselves when we perceive and conceive and concretize what we have perceived, that we say it's real? And to what extent will we hold on to that and become righteous about it and judge others for not experiencing the same thing? So then somebody who can see comes in and says, it's an elephant. You're right, but you don't have the big picture. You don't see it. You don't see the totality. Aha. The big picture. So there's no wrong or right in what the blind men perceived or what anybody perceives and conceives. But again, it's all learned. The name of what is conceived, and go from there. So that's when intelligence comes in. We have learned all that can be learned about our culture and how we are in the culture. And everything that has been suggested thus far is about reality. It's about, because there is no direct experience. We think, and thinking is part of the equation in talking about something. So if we really investigate, we see we're always talking about what something is. And that's the measurement. Whether it's a scientific measurement to quantify what reality is, looking at it on the microscopic, cellular level, it's about it. It's about interpreting what is perceived and conceived. So again, it's about subject and object. And there's no, what we're inquiring, there's no right or wrong of anything that's been suggested thus far. It's investigating and see what's it all about. So where are you right now in what's been suggested? Do you resonate with it? Do you not understand it? Whatever you're experiencing is perfect for the moment. So there's no judgment in whatever the experience is. So we have this consensual reality. And there are those who oppose this consensual reality. And there have been events, contemporary events, won't go into historical events, that have questioned the consensual reality. And one of the major mainstream breakthroughs was the movie Matrix. That movie presented an alternative reality, and it blew away so many people that had never considered another way to experience the world. It was a breakthrough. And the response was phenomenal to Matrix, the first Matrix. The second and third, I have no respect for. It was just milking the first one, but the first one had so many new ideas in the way of presenting them in a formula with violence and so forth, but the questions that were posed provoked a lot of searching. And for many, it began questioning, self-inquiry. So that was a milestone in looking at consensual reality and the acceptance of that. A tool, much like the movie Matrix, there are tools to question the status quo of the reality that we hold to be true and real. One tool is psychedelics. In taking psychedelics, what can happen is the thinking process, which may have happened during the meditation for you, slows down. And in the slowing down of thinking, something else can be realized. Much like what the movie Matrix presented. Something else can be revealed. And it's an opening. Psychedelics can be a tool for introspection and opening. And understanding something that's non-lineal, that's not part of a consensual reality. But one of the trade-offs in using a drug or drugs is you come down from it, and then you can be attached to that tool is the only way to have this experience. And then that tool, like anything else, can be abused and can become harmful. But it has its use for many people as a tool of opening and questioning. And another tool is meditation. In meditation, the same thing can take place as you may have experienced today. Thinking slows down, and then something else can be revealed. Because our reality is based on thinking about something, thinking what we've learned about that, and then that's our reality. So when we break that pattern of thinking, then something else can be revealed. So we've been talking about the relative. Reality is relative based on two, subject and object. And the object is necessary for there to be the subject. This is two. So with meditation or some other tool, there can be revelations in a different way of experiencing life. Not lineal. Because lineal is all the information that we have gathered about our world, about ourselves. And this we hold to be who we are. And it is real. That is our reality. So then there's the questioning of that, as we have mentioned. But this brings up a lot of fear. To start questioning everything that you have learned, all the intelligence that has been used to understand yourself in relation to the world, subject-object. And fear can come about because you're questioning the basis, the bottom line of who you are. But that fear can be used to understand, but not understand in the conventional way, logically, because logic is how most of us have lived our lives, logically, orderly, because that brings about security. To know what's going to happen next, to try and control what's going to happen next. This all benefits me and I. It's to sustain me, to perpetuate me, and get what I want. And that's the consensual reality of most humans, based on whatever culture you're living in. So there is a breakthrough. And then starts the self-inquiry, seriously, for people who are really interested in finding out something that's been revealed in these moments of less thinking. And again, even when thinking slows down, there is still perception, perceived, perceiving. So that's there. And the awareness of that. But what can happen, and that's a major shift, but then what can happen is something, I hesitate to use these adjectives, profound, something that may never have been experienced before. And that is when thinking stops and there are no thoughts. This is the void. There is not two. There's just I amness, that. No more subject-object. And that is what, for the purposes of our inquiry, we can call absolute reality. The material, the two, is material reality. It takes two. In the absolute reality, nothing is needed. Can't even be described. It can only be pointed at because there are no words. The words are there: the void, awakening, enlightenment, but they're just a description of something that can't be described. Just the words are words. But it can be realized. Not by me, not by an I, because the I is a result and part of this consensual reality. And then the realization that the I is an expression of the absolute, not separate. As the wave is part of the ocean, not separate, but an expression of the ocean and returning to the ocean. Not separate, but all connected. Everything an expression of that. Consciousness. But you can't be aware of consciousness because you are consciousness and all the expressions of it. The awareness requires a subject-object. So, what can be done? Nothing. What can be done to realize that? It's letting go of trying to realize that. Letting go of everything we think is real. Like the blind men. To realize that is part, a small part of the elephant. And not holding on, but realizing it's a small part. And in that realization, in that recognition, is the letting go, is the release to allow that to be revealed. So again, reality, as we have explored from two different perspectives: the relative, the material world, and the absolute, the immaterial, the invisible, and no separation between the two, all together. And confusion is part of that, to let go of trying to understand what we've spent our lives understanding, because we have been taught to understand who we are, how we relate to the world, and to control that relationship. So what's being suggested is totally the opposite. Not to try and understand, but let go of understanding, which the tools we alluded to earlier can help. So it cannot be understood by the normal means. That's the mystery. That cannot be described, ineffable, can only be pointed at. And that's all that's happening now, is something. We're talking about something, pointing at something. But we have arrived to that point logically. From this, to this, to this, to perception, conception, a limited reality, or a reality that cannot grasp the totality. So, in a sense, here today we have, if you agree with what's been suggested thus far, we have consensual reality. I see a question coming, and that's fine.
No,
Please.
I just didn't get the second part of what you said.
Which part?
My question, like just now, the sentence, this accent.
Okay, so can somebody play it back? Because I don't remember what was said.
Never mind, just continue on.
Okay, maybe you're referring to logic and lineal thinking. This inquiry has been lineal. It's been what you could perceive and conceive as logical. We have taken it from perception to conception to the story of the blind men and so forth as a story to illustrate. So we could look at that as all logical and linear. And then it's to let go of all that. And what is there now? To try and understand the logic that we have used to come to this particular point of letting go of logic. That's the big jump. To let go of the past, and already the logic that we have used to come to this point is the past. Okay, and that may sound confusing, but it's a microcosm of the macro. It's the experience now. To logically want to understand what's been suggested, what we've explored thus far, and take it to a logical conclusion, which I'm saying and suggesting there isn't. In letting go of all this logic we have used to get to this point, then something else can materialize. But it's letting go of the past. And that's the big shift. To not understand but letting go of trying to understand everything that we have gathered, all this intelligence of me and the world, to understand my relationship to it. When all of that is let go of, then something else is realized. And I grant you, it doesn't make sense. And that's the mystery. It's nonsense from a logical perspective. And that's the paradox and the contradiction that keeps it a mystery, because the human mind has no reference point. It's like a computer. It just gathers data and information. And we're talking non-lineal. So, if you're confused, okay, experience that confusion. That's what mindfulness. What is the confusion? What's the experience? Is the mind all jumbled up trying to understand, searching for an answer? What's happening in the body? Is there contraction? Is there confusion? What is confusion? That's just a word. What's the experience in this moment of confusion, of not understanding what's taken place? That's meditation. That's the reality of what is. So if you're confused and have a question, please don't be shy. It's okay to be confused and look for a logical answer. I may not give it to you, but it's okay to ask questions, because that's part of the inquiry and the self-inquiry where we are.
The guy claiming it to be an elephant.
Say again?
The guy that the other blind person that proclaimed it was an elephant. The other person could have been blind.
But the one who claimed
the one that said that he was, or she was sighted, could have also been blind.
Yeah, could have been. But that person who has sight and saw this object, which from that person's understanding is called elephant.
No, I thought it'd be funny if he was, or they were also blind.
It depends how you use blind, the blind leading the blind and so forth. But again, these are words, like the cliche, but a rose is a rose by any name. So the word does not describe what is experienced. It's just a way of talking about it. And that's what we do. We talk about things. We tell stories about things. Nothing wrong with it. That's how we communicate. But to see that these are stories, and stories in and of themselves are not real. They're stories. And the ultimate story is the story of myself, who I believe I am, and want to continue to be in this life or the next life, if that's your story.
So if we remove the story, we remove the past and the future, which obviously doesn't happen anymore, then what do we have?
Okay. If you remove the past, the future,
we have the constant present, which means that everything that we take to be reality is actually not.
Okay, if you remove the question or the statement, if you remove the past or the future, then there is the present. But let me suggest even that is part. Because let's say, consider the possibility that there is only the present, and the past, which is a memory, is taking place now, not then. It's in the present. And the thoughts about the future are not taking place later, but now, in the present. So we could say that there's only the present, and everything is taking place now, not before and not later. That's another way of looking at it, you see. So any perspective, anything we say about anything that is we thought to be true is just talking about something. It's a perspective. That's all. It's just a way of talking and a story about something. But when we are able to see through that, then we can appreciate all stories and all perspectives without needing to attach to any one. To see that is the play of life. So, and then there is, okay, and in that is that letting go, oh, okay, and the acceptance and everything else that is compassion, because you see that you may have realized that all these stories are false, but other people whom you interact with don't. So can you not judge them, but say, oh, okay, I can appreciate where you are, and I can appreciate the story you believe to be true, because maybe you've unpacked your story to some extent. See? We're storytellers, and it's wonderful. But stories are not true. They're just a way of communicating about something. So what's your experience in this moment? Is confusion reigning? Or is there peacefulness? One is not any better than the other. It's just what is. We may strive for this peacefulness, but in letting go of striving, then we realize it's always there. It's there. The striving kind of. It's just the expression of that. So, please, anybody else with a confusing question or not? Please.
Often we identify us with words or with things what we see. For example, a baby, when he sees it, he sees only pictures, colors. You don't know that there's a human and that there's this. You don't have the words like a blind man. Maybe a blind man was touched before elephant. Now that's elephant because you know the same about us. Now when we see something different, we are not open, or we are very open-minded, but then we give him a name, and the thing loses.
Yeah, it's
his
thingness. Yeah, we want to understand it. We want to label it. We want to define it. What use is it? Then we get into that whole.
But then everything is not real, and everything is real at
Yeah.
the same time. It's like
Same time. It's all together. Yeah.
And the ego often used to identify itself with a word and want to catch it, and then it begins a fight between different persons.
Yeah.
You know, it's God, and no, it's not the universe.
Right,
it's
right.
only words.
Whatever your belief is. Whatever your belief is, and to what degree will you hold on to your belief as opposed to somebody else who believes differently? Will you judge them? Will you want them to believe the same way you believe? And will you take the hammer and will you go after them to subdue them and make them believe the way you do? We see it. Those are the wars, just based on beliefs. A belief in this particular land is my land, this is your land, you step over my land. You believe in this God, and I believe in this God.
Often it's connected with fear, no?
Oh, yeah.
When you connect it, the same thing with love. There's only, for me, it's only love and fear which exists. So
Yeah.
connected with love, but you can call it how you want. So you're more open because you don't not fear to lose your ego or lose your identification. You're only open.
And I would speculate, theorize that in our lives we have experienced this non-thinking, this absolute. But because the thinking process is so strong, it's kind of run over because we're trying to understand it and try to put it in a context. That's if it's left a serious impression. But it is available at all times, and it is something as part of being human. It's something that is there. Athletes refer to being in the zone when they are playing a sport. There is no separation between subject and object. The subject is gone. They are that. They are the basketball. They are that.
Like playing drums.
Yeah. And it's that. So it takes place all the time by different names. And athletes admit they don't know how to come to that zone any more than we can come to it. Meditation seems to be a tool, that may assist, may prepare for something, but no guarantees. There's no formula. It's letting go of the formulas and being on the trapeze without the safety net. Not knowing. That's it, not knowing. And the willingness to do that. Please. Anybody else with a question or comment?
I have another question.
Sure.
Often seems that the people who are too connected with this identification in the world or with the ego have the power. For example, people like, I'm not sure if I won't say names, but and the people who are spiritual, more elevated, they are like, they don't rule the world. It's like they are only in the world, but they're not like the.
They are not in power.
Yes.
Yeah. So your statement, or is it a question?
It's a question how you can handle that. Maybe more consciousness people maybe get more power in the world, or not power, maybe more influence in the world, that the good and bad doesn't happen, but that more consciousness things happen.
Okay. So your question is, those who are more spiritually advanced don't seem to have the power in the world. Those who are egocentric and very egomaniacal seem to have the power, are the presidents and prime ministers and so forth. Okay? Some smiles. Well, there's a couple of ways to look at that. First of all, you can look at it from a historical perspective, and you see that these people in power are given the power by their subjects. It's a democracy. You vote for this particular person, and that's the consensual reality that is agreed upon. Okay. And then in totalitarian countries, the power is taken, and the subjects usually surrender, acquiesce, or in some cases they revolt. But we have the two. We have the subject and the object, and let's remember, human beings are animals. We are part of a herd, and in the herd there's always a leader. So there is following the leader of the herd. So as animals, what's been happening is quite logical in that sense, on a biological, sociological level. But let's look at the so-called spiritual person. The spiritual person, by virtue of whatever degree there is an understanding, by the very nature of that person comes into contact with people who will experience something, an energy from that person. If you're with the Dalai Lama, you're going to experience something that may shift for you something. So when you're with somebody who is spiritually mature, let's say, who has come to realization, that person influences the world in which they inhabit. Not out there, but here and there. And that influence with one person can bring about the influence with another, the 100th monkey syndrome. So it's about changing oneself, not changing out there, because the world is what you are. How you perceive the world is the world. So, as far as I'm concerned, the transformation begins here. The self-questioning of who am I? Because what's out there is just a representative of you and all the different aspects of oneself. the greed and the control that some president or prime minister shows, can we say that we've never experienced the greed or the control? So we can see that that is an extension of ourselves. And we can understand, not agree with the policies of somebody like that, but we can understand. And in the Bible it says, what is that phrase? You can disapprove of the sin but accept the sinner, or something to that effect. You don't have to agree with the result or the activity, but understand that which has led to that. So again, there's different ways of looking at that, and we'll get into the next inquiry next week is what is suffering, personal suffering and world suffering. So we'll explore that a week from today. Please, anybody else? Again, there's not one way to look at it and say that it is any more right than any other way. It's just a way of talking about it. Okay.
I think also when you're saying like leaders,
Yeah.
that there are different leaders for different, from the animal point of view that you were talking about. From an animal point of view, as a herd, the leader is for survival. But the leaders of the leaders of the world here aren't for survival. They're for political survival. And so I believe that there are different leaders for the different aspects of our journey of life.
Okay.
Because our leaders of survival, in theory, are our mothers and family, and the people that feed us and the people that give us morals to
That
survive.
nurture us.
Yeah. So I think there's differences there.
Yeah.
Leader.
Yeah.
And what they should give you. And I think some people believe that those people are for survival of their little community, but in fact it's not. It's for your own good.
Yeah. And it's again, it comes back to oneself. And how does one relate to the leaders? I mean, you look at a leader such as Nelson Mandela. Fantastic. What he went through to come to his realizations and compassion for those that imprisoned him and so forth. That's realization.
What is reality like without our consciousness and like ideas of like morality or like right or wrong or time even, like, because to the rest of the universe, like, time like has no purpose really. So like
Are you
reality
asking what is the
different
purpose?
No, I guess just like is reality something entirely different, like without us here to like perceive it?
Well, reality is what you perceive and what you
Like
believe
the
it
tree
to
in the
be.
woods. Sorry, the tree in the woods. If it falls down, would anybody be able to hear it if no one was there? Type of thing.
Can you speak a little louder?
Quantum theory. There's
Yeah.
If you're in a forest and a tree falls down,
Yeah.
and no one's there, does it make a sound?
That's a Zen Buddhist koan, not scientific.
It's not scientific, but it is in Schrodinger's cat.
Ah, okay. Ah, good. I've just learned something.
But as you said a while ago, quantum theory and spirituality do seem to blend together. They are a synergy of a similar thing.
Yeah, I came across a quote recently that science and religion was used religion in this case. Ours trying to find the language pointing to the same thing. I question about religion doing that, but I would insert spirituality rather than religion. I think religion is there to perpetuate itself with a belief system. So it's not really questioning its belief system and how it's become institutionalized. But spirituality and science, I think there's much meeting on it. And the Dalai Lama has been discussing that with quantum physicists for a number of years. The Buddhist perspective and the quantum physics perspective, and they meet more than they don't in language. In language.
Historically, that has always been the case
Yeah.
as well, because people always justify things that happen in science by religion, by spirit, and
Yeah.
by religion back then, but they have always been interlinked because a higher power has always been seen as the answer before our awareness became to science, and then we split that, and it's interesting seeing that now come back together.
Well, still, many quantum physicists say they're atheists, and they're quite proud of being an atheist because their theories and their explorations for them have proven that there is no higher power. It's all quantifiable. So, yeah.
I disagree.
Yeah, I'm not.
No, I think science and religion are just angry at each other. That's all. It's like two children. We're all looking at the same image. Artists, religion,
Yeah.
science. We're all looking at the same image through our own perspective.
Yes.
And those two are just upset with each other because they've been battling for too long. So they go, well, what you say is stupid. But in the meantime, it's the same image, different perspective.
That's what we're talking about. Different perspectives.
That's
And when you hold on to your perspective is the real perspective, then to what extent will you go for others to believe that way? Or can you see that they're perspectives and they can change at any moment as you change your ideas and your perceptions? You see? Always changing.
Could we then say that it is actually language as a tool that brings about this confusion and the need to conceptualize things and to agree on things or disagree on things? So if this might go a bit far, but if we as humans were evolved enough to not need language to communicate with each other, just on a level of consciousness by looking into each other's eyes or whatever, would that bring about or bring forth the absolute truth and the absolute reality, as in no more need in agreeing on different perspectives? Or
Well, language is a way of communicating. It's a symbol, but we believe it to be what's described. But it's not. It's just pointing at something. It's about something. But then again, in silence, between the words, there is something that can be realized, and that can be communicated to somebody else. That energy, that realization, energetically, as I mentioned before, when there is that kind of realization that is not necessitated by language, then it is available for everybody else to experience it. You've been around people where their energy is such that you experience it non-verbally, right?
Yeah.
It's there. It's not because of language. Language is just talking about something, but there is the energy that's totally different.
I would like to say something to what you said. For example, the most biggest scientifics always was connected with religion, also from Einstein.
I have no idea what you're saying.
My English is so bad. Sorry.
Just speak louder.
Okay. For example, a lot of big scientifics was connection with religions. For example, Einstein believes a lot in spirituality, religion, and scientifics.
Yeah.
But then the scientifics, the lobby, of course, is full of fear because he has power and wants to lose his power. So they are against the religion, and the religions always, the Catholic Church, for example, also have a lot of power, always a lot of fear, and so they are against. But the creators of both normally are in both ways. When you see, for example, Einstein or I don't know the names, but
Sure. What you're saying is that religion and science based on perpetuating their belief system, are fearful of the questioning of that. And therefore they hold on tightly. But there are those scientists and those spiritual people like Dalai Lama and others that are questioning, that want to understand the so-called opposite, if you will. And there's no opposite. You see it, that it's all connected. It's all part of that totality. A way of describing the universe, a way of describing. Again, it's about it and the language used. And one group says that we can quantify it, and the other group says, no, that's not the only way. That's your limited way. But there is the other way.
It's like we have 5 senses, yes? And when we could have 10 senses, maybe the reality would be so different. For some people who eat maybe some psychedelical things, they see more in the nature than it is for the normal people, but maybe it's really there.
Well, that's it. There's the not knowing. That's when you explore something, not knowing what's going to happen. The possibilities are limitless. And that's what the great visionaries in time, historically and now, are discovering. When there is that calmness and the capacity to see something fresh and new, then we have the revelations and the great artists and all of these things, because it's not coming from the old. It's not coming from this mind stream that is based on the past and trying to hold on to it for the future. Then there is that's the creative creation taking place in each moment. And those that are called visionaries, that are able to, in that moment, come up with something in whatever discipline. And the capacity is there for all of us, not just a quantum physicist. But if you sit and do meditation or something else, and there is the slowing down of thinking, then something else can be revealed. So if there are no more questions or comments, let's close with a few minutes of just sitting quietly together. So just relax. And again, let go. Let go of everything that we've inquired about, investigated. Be aware of the thoughts that are taking place for you about what has been discussed so far. And if possible, effortlessly, just let that go. There's the sound of a motorbike passing. Sensation in your body as you move part of your body. This is presence. Present with what is. And not knowing what's going to appear in awareness next, but just being open and accepting of whatever is arising, be it a thought, a sound, or a sensation. So relax and rest in this not knowing, the awareness which is there, unchanging, while everything else, thoughts and sounds and sensations, are changing. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you.